Deryck Poole, man. Um, I'm not sure if everybody can hear you right now. Of course, I just pulled you up and you disappeared. So,
It's like magic. Can you hear me?
right now you're back in. All right. I've got you. The internet should
Okay.
have you. Internet, if I look like I'm talking to myself and not anyone else on the feed, make sure you let me know if you can hear me. Also, make sure you let me know that we've got Deryck and myself on here tonight. Welcome to May 2024 Training Talk Show. It's going to be a great show tonight. We're going to jump into ammunition, and not just like basic topics of ammunition, but really, we're going to talk about personal defense ammo and what you should be looking for with any caliber or any ammunition. So we're going to jump into that here in just a couple of moments. As a reminder, this show would not be possible without our sponsors. And so we big thank you out to Primary Arms Online. Y'all know we plugged them a bunch because they're an awesome website. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, definitely do so. As I've pointed out before, you really can't jump on their site often anyway without being able to find some sort of discount code, available for at least first-time purchasers. So if you haven't checked that out, be sure to do so. Primary Arms Online store as a sponsor here tonight. We are also just a couple of months into the Personal Defense Network training tour. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to jump in one of the many classes around the United States with one of the many instructors. But if you have not, be sure to check out the PDN training tour website to be able to get those dates and locations and different offerings and whatnot. Deryck, man, what's going on?
Not much. PDNtrainingtour.com. I don't know if you said it.
PDNtrainingtour.com. So you're better at
Yeah.
kind of pulling up those websites than I am, in the
Well, I
chat.
just didn't know if you said it.
I
I
don't know if
didn't
I
think
did.
you did.
I probably did. So yeah, PDNtrainingtour.com is the shortcut way to get to that. Of course, you can also get to it from the personaldefensenetwork.com as well.
Yeah.
You been doing good over there in Florida?
Yeah, man. Same old, same old. It's getting nice and hot. Getting that summer heat already. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's all right. I am looking forward to the summer heat. But you're headed north here soon, right?
Yeah. Headed to Denver for Memorial Day weekend. Gonna be out there with Guns for Everyone and Edgar and Chris Gerke, and I'll be leading instructor development, intuitive defensive shooting instructor development, 3-day class.
Yeah, awesome. Those of y'all that have tuned in for a while know that Deryck and I have been teaching that program under different banners, the instructor side of it, for many years. I've been to a bunch of different courses in life, and it's still what I believe to be the best information possible for fundamental self-defense. And so, if you are teaching and looking to jump in and and learn more information, especially on physiology, neurology surrounding human performance factors in self-defense shootings or incidents, that'd be a great opportunity in that Denver area with Guns for Everyone hosting. So a good 3-day program. If you are not currently teaching, but you've been thinking about trying to jump into that, maybe you have a teaching background besides firearms or something like that, or you're looking to take your skills to the next level for teaching, then definitely also a good opportunity to jump in. And when is that one? That's coming up
Uh,
here soon, right?
yeah, Memorial Day weekend. So we start on the Friday, what's that, the 24th, 25th. Start Friday the 24th, 25th, 26th. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's at the Triple J Armory
Okay, yeah.
in the Denver area. You been there?
I have not. I've
Okay.
taught
So,
south of there in Pueblo, Colorado, out
okay.
at the Guns for Everyone Ranch. And so I guess about an hour or
Okay.
so south of Denver. No, that's not true. It's got to be an hour or so south of Colorado Springs, which is an hour or so south from Denver.
Okay.
But
I've
no,
never
it's
been to the range. Last time I was out there, what the heck was the name of the range? I'm gonna have to think about it for a little bit. I'm drawing a blank. But we were on an outdoor range, but it was not their range. Um,
okay. Yeah, it was out at like a ranch out in the middle of nowhere.
yeah, Don Edwards does a lot of Night Fighter
Mm-hmm.
stuff there, like, because I saw one of the owners there. I was talking to him. He goes, "Oh, you know Don?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know Don. Real good friends with Don." He goes, "Don comes out here all the time, and we do night fighter stuff." I'm like, "Ah, this would be a good place for it." It's like sort of in the middle of nowhere, and you could pretty much do pretty much anything you want
Yeah,
out there.
no, definitely. So you can learn more about that on the website as well. And that was pdntrainingtour.com.
Yep.
There you go. Well, cool. We've got many other sponsors of the training tour as well. We may talk about, some of the stuff that we've been using here in the last few weeks on the training tour here in a couple of minutes. One of the topics tonight is ammunition. I'm curious, those of y'all that are tuning in, what do you look at as your go-to personal defense ammunition? Maybe for rifles, maybe for handguns, but what is your personal defense ammo? And you can throw the caliber in there as well. We may talk a little bit about caliber choice tonight. But as you saw in the description, we are throwing in a discussion of ammunition qualities, different variables that surround it, but all of it is ultimately what we're pulling from the FBI's testing protocols when it comes to self-defense ammunition. I don't know of any single entity or organization that's probably put more resources into studying what ammunition should be capable of doing, more so than the FBI. And you know where all that started, Eric?
Didn't that happen after the Miami shootout?
That's right.
Isn't that the
It's
start of it?
Miami shootout. You had law enforcement officers using guns, and ultimately they were failing to be effective, or and they started asking the question like, "Hey, this isn't working." Right. And so you had a stream of law enforcement agencies that all of a sudden are like, they're not trusting things like 38 special and 9 millimeter. Like, wait, we need something bigger. We need something badder. We need something Magnum. Right. And all of a sudden you've got like 40 Smith & Wesson, that's born through these years, and that kind of stuff. Right. You had law enforcement agencies that, started going after bigger is better, right? How many times have y'all heard someone say at the gun range or maybe in the gun store, well, if it doesn't have a 4 in front of it, then it's not for me, right? You can't trust it if it doesn't have a 4 in front of it. You ever heard that, Deryck?
Yes.
Too many times, right?
And I've even heard it in class. And when I hear it in class, and I'm always like, okay, but they do make a 50 AE,
Right, they do. So why aren't you carrying the 50 AE?
right?
Absolutely. And or the 44 Magnum, right? There's bigger
Right.
options. So where do we stop that, right? And I'm curious, Deryck. I'll give you my answer here in a second. But what was your first defensive caliber or carry weapon caliber?
Whew. Well, this is kind of embarrassing, but over 20 years ago, I used to choose my carry weapon like a woman would choose her purse or her shoes for the day. Because damn it, I was a Marine and I was a gunfighter. But I would carry a 45 some days. Some days I'd carry 9 millimeter. Some days I'd carry 38. Snub nose revolver in the pocket. Some days, even for a while there, I even had a holster to carry FN 57.
Loyalty to no one, right?
Oh wait, and 357 Sig.
Oh my goodness, that's
357
right.
Sig at the time was my favorite
I
caliber.
forgot
Was
about that.
357
I
Sig.
mean, it was like
Yeah.
you and I don't know, it must have been like 3 or 4 other people in the United States that was the go-to caliber, right?
Right. I don't even know. Can you like? I have a couple thousand rounds still of 357 Sig because I stopped carrying it and stopped shooting it all the time. But I don't even know. Can you even find 357 Sig anymore? I haven't
Well,
even looked
I
because I
doubt
know.
it. It's probably about like 410 shells. They don't exist, right?
Well, I mean, you can't find Gap ammo anymore, right?
I don't have any, that's for sure.
I mean, what's that? The Glock automatic pistol? Isn't that what Gap
Hmm.
stood for?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. I got into 357 Sig because of someone one time said something about Gators,
Oh,
and I was like,
oh,
oh,
Gators, yeah.
well. 357 SIG, it's got the muzzle velocity of an AR. So, woohoo!
Absolutely. So it's mine's just about as embarrassing, right? And I think that this kind of shows how much evolution we've had and an understanding of all this before we're even jumping into the topic tonight. But my first carry gun wasn't my first defensive. I tell you, when on my 21st birthday, I went out and bought what I thought was the best concealed carry pistol, right? It was a Glock 27 and 40 Smith & Wesson. And man, was that little thing snappy, right?
Yeah.
And I owned it for several years, but really, my first like go-to, concealed carry handgun for a little while was a full-size 1911. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but chambered in 45 ACP, and I was of the belief that it better be a 40 or it better be a 45 because that puny little 9mm is not something you can count on, right? And the more I started paying attention to firearms and the gun industry and kind of what was happening with law enforcement around the nation, I'm like, wait, hang on, why? Maybe I should rethink this 40 thing, right? If law enforcement thinks it's the coolest thing around, then why isn't it in my gun? And so, my next concealed carry gun that I carried for a couple of years, was chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. And yeah, it was snappy, and we've talked about this in the past on the show that while I'm, delivering this much more energy downrange, I'm really feeling more energy when it comes to recoil management, right? And the guns were a lot snappier. And I don't remember what year that was, but it was a bit ago, right? And all of a sudden, I'm learning more, I'm teaching more, I'm kind of exploring more in knowledge and starting to look at things with question marks everywhere I looked, right? It's like, all right, well, tell me why, right? If 40 Smith & Wesson is the answer, then I want to know why. And every direction I looked, I started, peeling back different layers because I wanted to have a better understanding. Is this the best? And if this is the best, then tell me why it is, or explain to me why it is. And that started kind of on my journey of evolution, through the different calibers. And at this point, I mean, I think I've carried a 9mm handgun for, I don't even know, 17, 18 years, somewhere around in there. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a bit, that I've had a 9mm handgun, and obviously there's been exceptions here and there, but for the most part, I'm carrying a 9mm handgun and have for a while. And you teach and I teach and other people watching tonight teach. And if my students are asking me, why are you carrying a 9mm handgun? Why aren't you still carrying that 45? Why aren't you still carrying that 40? Then I can't just say, well, because 9mm is better. I have to be able to peel back those layers and begin to explain the objective truths behind what it is that I carry and why I carry that. And I think that that's what we're going to kind of jump into tonight is those objective truths. And so kind of going back, to the FBI's protocols when it comes to testing ammunition, I mentioned that they've put tons of resources and money into this. And so they have their protocols that are outlined on any type of ammunition that they're testing. And they'll use a 10% ballistic gelatin. It's a big old block of Jello, right? Am I Jello? No, I've got bones, I got clothes, and I'm certainly not Jello. But what this testing media does, for those that aren't familiar with it, is one, it gives us a control. It gives us something that's very consistent and repeatable. But what it also does is helps, it matches kind of the fluidness in our body that forces the hollow point ammunition to begin to open up the way that it would in our body without hitting bones and other stuff, right? And so with this, they'll test it through a thin layer of clothing and a thick layer of clothing. And if you go back into some of the old hollow point rounds, and even some still today, but definitely some of the older designs, they would struggle to expand because they would get clogged up with that clothing. And so we want to know that. Is clothing going to clog up that cavity in such a way that that bullet does not expand? Because we're wanting the bullet to be able to expand for maximum effectiveness, as well as really reducing the chance of over penetration. So we're wanting the projectiles to stop in whatever target that we are working with. And so 10% ballistic gelatin fired through thin clothing and through thick clothing. And ultimately, we're wanting those projectiles to travel in a straight line and not, veering off at angles from point of entry. We're wanting the bullets to obviously expand, and we're wanting those projectiles to make it to a consistent depth of somewhere between 12 and 18 inches when it comes to this ballistic gel. And so, ideally, if we could just make it stop at 15 inches, awesome. 15 inches, that's the goal, right? That's right there in the middle, And why is that? Why are we? Where's the range come from, Deryck? From 12 to 18 inches.
The average depth of the human body required to get at least to those vital organs that actually produce a physical stop with the bullet round.
Right. And this is where, things like birdshot, it's like, all right, we just completely got this out of the equation when it comes for something like a shotgun. Because as Deryck mentioned, that the key piece there was forcing the physical stop. Right. Here's the thing, we know that more often than not, by exponential numbers, just the sheer presence of a firearm from a victim changes the minds of a lot of attackers, meaning, no shots fired. And that's an awesome situation, right? If you're forced to use a gun in self-defense, but you actually don't even have to fire the weapon, that's a win. But what happened there? You didn't force someone to stop what they were doing. You simply scared them and they changed their mind, right? All of a sudden, that risk versus reward that they were working off of, that risk of being shot, was all of a sudden not worth whatever they were after. And they changed their minds and run away, back away, put their hands up, whatever, right? And so it's a psychological stop. And that's what most of the gun stops are.
Yep. Even the ones where people are getting shot, it's usually not a physical stop immediately. It's they're tired of being shot or don't want to get shot anymore because it hurts. Now they might be found, 100 yards away after they ran and bled out, but most of the time it's generally like they're just don't want to get shot anymore because it hurts.
Right, that's it. It was loud, it hurts. You pulled a gun on them, and all of a sudden, like Deryck said, maybe they could be shot in the leg or the foot or the pinky toe and are not bleeding out, but yet have enough energy to sometimes run down the street, jump fences, run away, evade law enforcement, and maybe end up in the hospital later on and die of infection. And at one point in the self-defense and gun community, we would have counted that as a one-shot stop, right? And all of a sudden, that's what became super important going back into like the late 80s and stuff, is like, well, what's the caliber that stops the bad guy with one shot? Well, that bad guy that we just talked about got shot and stopped with one shot, but it certainly didn't force that person to stop. They could have used all of that energy, to continue to try to cause harm to you. And those of y'all that are watching, some of y'all have already experienced this, right? You've gone out, you've gone deer hunting or something like that. You've shot a deer. Sometimes that deer is even shot through vital organs, and yet it runs off, and you've got to go track it, 100, 200, 300 yards, right? Just because someone's shot doesn't mean that they're just completely dead and out of the fight, right? And we know that death is not the goal for that. Changing of behavior is. And so if they turn and run like the deer and run away, that's awesome. But if instead they're motivated, if instead they're on drugs, if instead they're not scared because you're shooting them or shooting at them or pulling a gun on them, and instead they're using all of that hate and energy to try to take your life, then we can't depend on that psychological stop from changing their behavior. And so we've got to be capable of forcing someone to stop, right? And that's what that 12 to 18 inches is that we've got to make sure the bullets are actually going deep enough into that a human attacker, that it is reaching something that is capable of taking the fight out of them. meaning it doesn't matter how motivated they are or what drugs that they're on, that their body cannot go on to continue to fight because we have drained blood from their body in such a way that that hydraulic system doesn't have the energy to be able to move forward and do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know how deep you want to get into the FBI thing. Like, have you ever, so like, I'm sure somebody might ask here or they're going to watch this and they're going to be like, well, you were talking about the FBI testing and all. Where do we get a copy of the list? Me personally, I've seen the list one time that I can remember for sure, but the list that I saw actually belonged to somebody that was a law enforcement person, and they had a copy of it. I have never ever seen one floating in the wild, and like I did a little Google foo, and like nothing came up.
Yeah,
So
somebody maybe somebody's got a link that's watching tonight. They can drop it in the comments or something.
I'm really wondering, like, is that something that's available to the general public, or is it freedom of information request has to get sent in and you're going to get mailed a paper copy of it?
Well, I mean,
Because what I
right.
saw was actually a paper copy. It was like a binder, like a little, not like a binder, but like a binder. And it was like a friend of mine that was in an agency. And he was like, oh, because he's in the training department. And he's like, oh, I got one of those. He goes, we were looking to buy our carry ammo for the year. And we were looking, we got a copy from the FBI. But I've never, and I've Googled it and everything, and I've never actually seen the actual list just pop up.
Right now, I'm going to be on a mission. I mean, I think if it
Yeah.
came through a FOIA request, that it would already exist out there in a digital format. You
And
know,
how often do they do it? You know, like
right.
do they like, like federal HST law enforcement, like that came out, I don't know how long ago, but it's been a
Yeah.
while. And did they just test it back when it first came out and like they haven't updated it and they won't update it unless federal HST makes some big change to either, the projectile, something, something along those lines. How do they bond the outer shell,
Right.
the outer casing to the lead? Like,
And so, it's an important term that you just mentioned right there is how do they bond it, right? And what Derek's talking about, if you're not familiar with bonded ammunition, is that you're definitely familiar with full metal jacket ammo if you're kind of tuning into this video, right? Well, the that outer plating, that jacket with regular ammunition has a tendency to fall apart, separate, from that inner lead core. So bonded ammunition is where that outer jacket has been physically or partically bonded to that inner lead core. And the idea is that after it, is passes through or goes into the target, that it's able to maintain almost 100% of its original mass, right? So if you weigh that bullet in the aftermath, that it didn't fall apart, it didn't fragment, didn't break down, but it weighs nearly the same. And so that would be the first recommendation is choosing bonded hollow point ammunition when it comes to self-defense. And but the federal HST that Deryck just mentioned is technically not a bonded round, but it certainly performs like one and has
yep,
in testing. And
yep,
I think federal HST is definitely one of the most widely tested rounds, just because so many different agencies have tested it. So many different, just people in the private sector have tested it for that matter, because it is a pretty popular self-defense round.
yeah.
Um,
So
I don't know if you've seen Lucky Gunner Labs, and I don't have any affiliation, to be mentioned in them tonight, Deryck. Uh,
yep,
I mean, with the show or anything, but I don't know if you've seen it, Deryck. You
yep,
probably have. But Lucky Gunner, they sell ammo and that kind of stuff. But if you jump on their website, they've got Lucky Gunner Labs. If you haven't been there, that I know of, it's the largest database for ammunition testing. And you can go in there and pull up maybe your carry brand of ammunition. You can see the type of gun or barrel that it was shot through, and you can actually see what that looks like in testing, at least with their test, right? And it's definitely a solid reference to be able to look at. Just recently I was trying to find 22 Magnum ammunition that would reach that 12 to 18 inch mark. And that's the first place I went and looked, was to let me dive into their database and see what all the different brands and weights and bullet types did with their testing of it. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, because it's a pretty cool database, of ammunition.
If I remember right, like it's been a while since I've looked out there, but if I remember right, they only do the 10% gelatin with the heavy and light clothing. Like they don't, like, cause like for those that aren't familiar, the FBI will test it through plywood, a certain depth, a certain thickness of plywood, thin from plywood, and then gelatin block behind the plywood. They'll do it with sheetrock or drywall with this gelatin block behind it with heavy and light clothing, and then they will do it through 2 sheets of, I don't know what, 20 gauge steel, whatever simulates
Yeah,
a car door,
car doors.
and then they do another one in, and from there into the gelatin block, and then they do one to simulate a windshield of a car uh, into a gelatin block. Whereas the Lucky Gunner Labs matches what us as civilians would do, and they don't go through all those intermediate barrier type scenarios with their testing because
That's right. Yep. Because at the end of the day, most self-defense situations don't have plywood, glass, or metal in between victim and threat. Most of the time there's airspace and clothes in between victim and threat. And so it becomes something, while it's important in a lot of different contextual situations, it typically is unimportant when it comes to most self-defense equations. And so, we don't have to look at how it performs going through a windshield when, we can be more, certainly more tuned into how it performs as it goes through clothing, fat, and body.
yeah, yeah. There, like I can't remember why I was out there, what I was looking at. It's been a while, but I might have, there might have been some ammo that we didn't test because everything I carry is something that we've tested here at PDN. Like I carry the PDX, from their Defender series, because I know that's bonded, and they were one of our sponsors, and we got some round ammo. And then I was like, "Oh, this stuff's good," and I just kept buying it. And then I went out to Iowa on the tour, and I was working with Ernie uh, at Cedar Valley Outfitters, and I needed some more ammo. I was running low, and that's where I got my Federal HST from. So like
Yeah.
everything I shot is like stuff that we've tested and used. So
Right.
um,
It's usually one of those two, that you'll find in my gun,
yeah,
is the HST, or, a couple of the different, Winchester self-defense rounds that are both solid. And that's, if you find modern bonded hollow point ammunition, it's probably going to work. Because guess what? And this kind of brings us back, right? We're sat there and talked about 12 to 18 inches, ideally 15 inches. Well, when everybody knows that 15 inches is the benchmark, well, what happens? Well, now it doesn't matter if we're talking about 22 Magnum self-defense ammo, 380 self-defense ammo, 40 caliber, 9 millimeter, 38 special, 45 ACP. It doesn't matter if we're talking about self-defense ammunition. Everybody's trying to hit 15 inches in testing, right? And if you're trying to hit 15 inches of testing, well, in the background, now all of a sudden you got the manufacturers tweaking this, tweaking that, tweaking the other stuff in order to try to get to 15 inches and consistently, right? And so that was one of the big aha moments that I had somewhere many years ago. Is they're all trying to hit the 15-inch mark, and so they all do the same thing. They physically put holes into the target, but those holes aren't huge. It's not like the big rocket launcher coming through a rocket through somebody, right? The ammunition between, especially if we're talking about 9 millimeter, 40, and 45. Well, 9 millimeter is about 36 hundredths of an inch before expansion. 40 caliber is about 40 hundredths of an inch. 45 hundredths of an inch. So very small differences. And then there's the expansion. Well, the expansion coefficient that the manufacturers typically work off of is, I believe, somewhere about 1.5 to 1.7 times its original size. And so it's not like it just flattens out like a quarter, but it expands to about 1.5 or 1.7 times its original size. So is a 45 round that has expanded bigger than a 9 millimeter round that has expanded? Yes, but very small differences between the two. And so, Deryck, why are you choosing 9 millimeter over 45?
because when you look at the wounding capacity of, the most popular rounds, 45, 40, 9 millimeter, 380. Well, 380 and 9 millimeter make the same size hole. 38 is really close to a 9 millimeter hole. 45 is not more than like what in diameter, much more than like a millimeter. So like
Yeah,
when we look at
tenth
the
of an inch.
actual wound track and size, it's not that much bigger. But with a 9 millimeter, if I take a gun that's a 9 millimeter and grab a gun that's the pretty much the same size but chambered in 40 or 45, I'm gonna get more rounds in that 9 millimeter gun, and I get less muzzle flip, less recoil that I have to control, so I'm able to shoot the gun at a faster rate and impart more damage quicker to hopefully stop the threat quicker with that 9 millimeter over the other.
Yeah,
And
and
then we can add all the other, you know, it's the cheapest, even though ammo's not cheap. It's the most readily available. It's the most
yeah, I
popular, blah, blah, blah.
right. I don't even know if we want to use it's the cheapest anymore because, like you said, none of it's cheap. It hurts.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just it, right? It's that they're all doing about the same thing with very small differences in between the two. But when it comes to shooting them, I can shoot 9 millimeter faster than I can shoot 40 or 45. Deryck can shoot 9 millimeter faster than he can shoot 40 or 5. You watching this can shoot 9 millimeter faster than you can shoot 40 or 45. And so, all of a sudden, we're putting more rounds down range in the same amount of time. And here's where we start making stuff up. I'm going to make up some data right now, right? Is that there's no way that you can answer how many rounds it takes to stop a threat until the aftermath. That's objective, right? We know that part, because it could be one, or, I can show you situations where it took a 12 or 13, for that matter, actually hitting the bad guy before the person stopped, right? So we know we can't answer that question in the aftermath, but just what if? What if we could assign a number just for the purpose of, explaining this? Well, let's say that it takes 6 rounds to stop that threat, before the bad guy stops being a bad guy, right? And so you have to put 6 rounds accurately on the target until the bad guy stops being a bad guy. Well, I know I can do that faster with 9 millimeter objectively than I can with 40 or 45, right? So it's not the first shot that stops the bad guy. It's the last shot that stops the bad guy. And so whether it's the third or the fourth or the fifth or the sixth round for the purpose of this equation, it's a race trying to get to that last round. And I know I can get to that last round faster with 9 millimeter than I can with 40 or 45 because I'm shooting more rounds per second. So now if I know I can shoot more rounds per second accurately with 9 millimeter, well then what am I doing more damage with? The 9 millimeter or the 40 or the 45, right? If I'm able to deliver more rounds on target in the same amount of time, then kind of looks like if we ignore everything else for the purpose of the equation, that all of a sudden you're delivering more damage with 9 millimeter in the same amount of time than you would with 40 or 45. And like I said, there's so many different variables that can dictate all kinds of different changes. But for the purpose of just clearing it up and getting rid of some of that extra data, we can just simplify it. You can shoot 9 millimeter faster. And so if the shooting goes on for 3 seconds, there's a good chance that if you've got training and you've put in the work and you've put in the practice, there's a good chance that you have delivered and inflicted more damage with 9 millimeter than you have with something larger than that.
And if we want to go all the way back to the psychological stop thing, well, if the psychological stop is a thing, if you can shoot a 9 millimeter faster, they're gonna faster say, "I'm tired of being shot," and stop doing what what they were doing.
Right. No, definitely so. And look, none of them are magical. And so, it's 9 millimeters easier to control recoil with, which means you've got a greater chance of also keeping those rounds on target where they need to be.
Yeah.
But what about the wounding channel, Deryck? When I shoot deer, they've got like this big jello-y area on the inside of the deer, on the inside of the animal. It's like it's not just the diameter of the bullet, Deryck. It's got like woo, it disrupts this whole area and
But
destroys the surrounding area. What about that?
That has to do with the muzzle velocity that you get out of a rifle barrel that is not seen in a handgun caliber pistol.
right? So knockdown power.
Yeah, yeah, that if anybody's watching, let's see, let me age myself. When we talk about knockdown power, we're talking about what does it take for that one round to knock you down? Do you know what commercial that's from?
No, I don't.
Oh, you
You've
don't?
aged yourself. No.
Larry Potterfield, man,
Uh,
Midway USA commercial. What from back in the Rob's days of personal best defense.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I don't
Do you
look, man.
remember
My
that
memory
segment?
doesn't even go back that far. So those of y'all that haven't watched Deryck long enough, Deryck remembers every line that you should ever remember in every movie dating back to kindergarten.
Man,
Like my brain doesn't store like that.
it's the fear of Alzheimer's that keeps me trying to remember this stuff, junk like that.
No,
Yeah,
definitely. But yeah, it's as you said, I mean, knockdown power, the power it takes, to have one bullet knock the person back off their feet. Well, thank you Hollywood for completely screwing up, people's perception of what really happens when people get shot.
yeah. Oh my God, I was just watching the Die Hard 2 just came on, and he was talking about the Glock. What was
The
it? Glock
70,
71, the
yeah,
porcelain
porcelain
gun
Glock,
that's
Glock.
worth more than what you make in a year. You're like, huh?
I keep
You'd be
looking for it.
surprised what I make.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, can't find it. And then you know where the outlawing Teflon coated bullets came from.
I
That came from
remember, but I
Lethal
don't.
Weapon.
Yes, yeah. I was gonna say I knew I remember it from something.
Yeah, that
Yes.
came from Lethal Weapon.
So yeah,
Which,
Hollywood is just they've completely screwed up the perception of what really happens. It's the knockdown power. I guess you could like translate it over into the transfer of energy, right? The transfer of kinetic energy from the bullet going into the target. What is transferred into the target? What is being disrupted through there? Well, with rifles, as Derek pointed out, when you're shooting something like a 308 rifle that's traveling at a much faster speed than something like 40 or 45 or 9 millimeter, then you are getting a somewhat of a transfer of energy, and you get this temporary wounding cavity that does begin to not just have the physical hole that it's cutting through, but it will stretch those areas and create a wave of energy around that bullet, for lack of better terms. And so, as that goes through, it's damaging more than just what the projectile is. But that doesn't happen with lower velocity rounds that we typically are using for self-defense. And so, where on some of the rifles you've got 2,000 foot-pounds of pressure being delivered into that animal, you don't get that with handguns. They're all lower energy. And so with handguns, we ignore the temporary wounding cavity because it's very small differences between the two, and we just really focus in on what does the projectile do? What damage does that projectile do as it's passing through? And so that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a second ago. Is they're all doing roughly the same. Is the hole from a 45 bigger than 9 millimeter? Yes. But I got more ammunition in my 9 millimeter gun. I can shoot it faster. I can certainly train with it more if we're going to jump into costs and all that kind of stuff. And I can pick it up on just about any shelf at a gun store across the United States on any time that it's not buying frenzies that are going on and whatnot. And that's kind of where my thought process evolved into, more of jumping down the 9 millimeter train. And like I said, it's probably 17 years or so that I've carried a gun that has had 9 millimeter ammunition, in it along the way.
hey, and if somebody like, because when you look at ballistic gelatin testing, right? What do we see? We get to see as what that bullet does as it travels through. So we're thinking, okay, but Barrett, Derek, I see this big, massive, like thing form and then disappear as the bullet's traveling through the gelatin. Yeah, you do. But here's the thing. Here's the downfall of the gelatin. It's tensile strength, the ability to tear it. If you grabbed one of those blocks, you can just grab a hold of the block and tear it a whole lot easier, like this way, than you could if you just grabbed like a muscle off of my body and just tried to start ripping it apart. the ballistic gelatin, when you go end to end through it, is as close a simulation as we can getting to go through the body. So don't don't over don't give a big quantif don't like give some big like, oh, but look at that temporary cavity, because one, the temporary cavity is much bigger on the appears much bigger on a gelatin block than it actually is in reality going into the human body. And that hydrostatic shock that Barrett was talking about, with the rifle, even if the ammo is called hydro shock, that's just the name. It doesn't. It's a pistol round. It doesn't give hydrostatic shock that like a rifle round could on live tissue. So pay attention to that permanent cavity diameter and distance of depth of penetration.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's lots of novelty, I guess I'm going to classify it as novelty ammo that exists out there, novelty names and whatnot, that make it easier to market the ammunition, when it comes to just the general population, seeing the different ads and stuff like that. I still, with all the different stuff available, I still kind of stick with the very well tested and proven, lead-based hollow point ammunition. And I know there's some great copper stuff, solid copper ammo that exists out there as well. But I still have, stayed pretty true to the typical, lead ammunition. I like
Yeah.
the softness of the lead, as well. I remember when I used to hog hunt, a lot more, than I do now. We were limited on public land. We were limited to using the ammunition that was legal for whatever season was, going on at the time. And so I tried for a little bit. I'm like, oh, duck season's going on. Well, steel shot's legal, so let me go, let me use steel on hogs. And I found out very quickly, the hardness of the steel with did not work very well when it came to, just didn't have the right density to be able to penetrate, the hard plates on hogs that a normal lead would. And so I
Yeah.
abandoned that, very quickly.
Huh. I didn't. If somebody would ask me, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, steel." I would think steel would, you know, because it's so much harder than lead.
It's harder and lighter, right?
Yeah.
The lead's going to be heavier. But yeah, and so I stay true, with the hollow point ammunition, and I've experienced with all kind of, I mean, not just hollow point, but lead based, and I've tried and experienced with different stuff across animals over the years. And generally speaking, even when it comes to like all the ballistic tips on the rifles and stuff, I've gone away from those, when it comes to hunting, and stick with more of a bonded, more of a traditional bonded kind of soft point round.
I mean, I'm the same way. Like I use the same stuff as you do. The Winchester, the Federal HST, stuff like that. And like my students will ask, "What do I carry?" And I tell them readily, "What do I carry?" And I'm like, "But if you can't find it, you know, here's the basis of what you should pick around on." And I also follow it up with, there's nothing wrong with going to your like if you see one of your local PD officers just saying, "Hey, what kind of ammo do you guys carry on duty?" Because if you decide, okay, that's what they carry and you put it in your gun, I don't teach people to, fight or carry to win a court case. But if you go to court and they're like, why he was carrying this super killy hollow point federal HST, blah, 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 you know, well, that's what my local police department carries to protect me and our citizenry. So I figured if it's good enough for them, it should be good enough for me.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother show that we could jump into
Right.
with the legal battle. No, but it certainly makes it easier to explain your ammunition when you are like, well, that's what everybody carries in law enforcement around me, and so I figured that was the best option, right? And that's when you look at things like federal HST, you're going to find lot of law enforcement agencies carrying that.
Yep.
Spear, the gold dot ammo. You'll find a lot of law
Yep.
enforcement. And the good thing about the law enforcement hollow points is that they are usually sold in 50 round boxes, where a lot of the civilian stuff only comes in 20-round boxes. Law enforcement ammo is, because of the contracts and whatnot, generally is sold in 50-round boxes.
Yep. And the other thing about the law enforcement, like I said earlier at the beginning of the show, law enforcement usually has a copy of that FBI, their full testing schedule, and they've looked at everything on there and they've gone through it, and that's how they ended up picking the rounds that they were interested in and the companies that they hit up for requests for quotes based off of the information they got out of that ballistics test from the FBI. So they've done a
Definitely
lot of the
so.
work for you.
Yeah, they definitely have. And like I said, it's just, the direction that a lot of the industry looked into 20, 30, 40 years ago, we realized that as an industry, we were completely wrong, and I think that if you look in the direction of science with ammunition, what you find is everybody's, kind of going in the same direction now, which is good. We got a couple of questions and statements, that I'm seeing come up in the comments right now. One, let's see, where was that? Wild Bill Hickok got it done in the old Wild West with a pair of 36 caliber Navy Colt pistols, equivalent to a 380 round full metal jacket round today in the power factor. And it's 100%. We also used to like travel across the country in horses, right? And horseback and carriage, and they got it done with a whole lot less. And there's no doubt, that many of the patriots along the way were able to get it done with less technology than we have today. But we've got technology today, and it's on our side, and we might as well use it. And they make far better ammunition today than they used to, right? Look at the guns. The guns used to be smooth bore, and they're like, well, it'd make a whole lot more sense if we kind of put a spin on the bullet, before it left the
Yeah.
barrel, and kind of sent it out, into the air like a football, right?
Well, I mean, there was a time where, I can remember when I first started teaching where it was like, well, if you need to carry a 380 because you can't find a gun, big like somebody that like what for whatever reason they can't conceal, they don't make anything to conceal that's not a 380. Everything's too big. Or like, sometimes ladies with their purses, I have to purse carry because, I dress business professional every day and I only have enough room for a 380. And that used to be the case. Well, back then we were limited on the ammo choices and it was really hard to find a 380 round that produced enough velocity off of that short barrel to get that, 12 to 18 inches of penetration. Now, ammo's come a long way, and you can actually find ammo that will get you that penetration that you need. But at the same time, you're still going to spend a whole lot more for that 380 round than you are a 9mm round. And now we can have 9mm guns that come in the 380 size and end up with carrying 10 to 15 rounds of ammo in 9mm, and
Right.
it's much easier to find the 9mm. So, I don't poo-poo the 380, if that's or I was gifted this 380 and I like my 380. Cool. There's plenty of there's ammo choices out there for you that will get you the penetration that you need. Do I think it's the best and am I carrying a 380? No. But hey, personal defense, that first word, personal. It's a personal choice, right? We have to weigh the pros and cons of everything we're doing when it comes to what are we carrying? When are we carrying a reload? So you have to make your own choices. We're just going to give you the best information we have.
Yeah, another comment from the same commenter, from the same viewer tonight, JMB 1911. He also said, accuracy is final as part of his comment, right? And that's 100% true. And that's even coming into things like 380. And look, I know one instructor who, works with like really old people and, and helps people that have very little strength in their hands. And for several of his students, he's found that he kind of puts a focus on 22 long rifle or 22 Magnum with them simply because that's, kind of what they're capable of handling, recoil wise. And so there is a balance there, and there's always going to be exceptions there. And even myself personally, I told you all a little while ago, right, that I was kind of running down this angle of 22 WMR, 22 Magnum rounds, looking for, what would be a good option. There's several different 22 Magnum semi-automatics that have come to the market. So I'm like, let me just go play with it. Let me test it. Let me do my own testing in ballistic gel. Let me do my own testing with, reliability. I know reliability is going to suffer some when we come into rimfire ammunition, but with good quality ammunition, how much is that? 380 guns. We've seen several 380 guns, handguns that have come, to the firearms market that have been larger than some of the ones in the past. And so now all of a sudden, the recoil goes down over something like 9mm, because there are people out there that have a legitimate uh, need or desire to be able to protect themselves with a firearm that may still struggle with some of the normal traditional calibers that we talk about for self-defense. And so I think that those do exist out there, and and you'll hear people say, well, if you don't carry the gun, it doesn't work, right? And so there is some
Yeah.
truth into that. Obviously, for most of our viewers, for the large majority of my students, they're going to be fine with a 9mm handgun. But there are exceptions out there, and in the end, you are responsible for delivering rounds accurately. And if you're not putting them on target accurately, then can you really expect it to have a chance to be effective? But then also, the round itself has to be capable of getting deep enough to be effective.
Yeah. I've seen tests with pistols using the 22 WMR, and they get 15 inches of depth. You're getting the depth. It's the wound is a small
Right.
wound, but I mean, you can look at the news probably every darn day, and you'll see somebody got killed with a 22, somebody got killed with a 380.
Yeah,
You know,
no, I mean, it's definitely happened, or happens. Yeah.
yeah,
Let's see. Old Gyrene, am I pronouncing that correctly? I butcher names, guys.
probably
I really do butcher
because I'm an
names.
old gyrene. I'm not that old, but I'm a 50-year-old gyrene.
All right, good. He says, do you have concerns with bullet expansion in 3-inch or shorter barrels, particularly in larger calibers such as 45? The answer is yes.
Yep.
Here's the thing: is that the length of the barrel equals the amount of time the gunpowder has to burn up to generate the energy to push the bullet forward. And it needs velocity, for expansion. It needs velocity to be able to reach the depths and do things like crush bone and that kind of stuff, or potentially go through, automobile glass in order to still be effective on target, right? And so, is it a concern? No, absolutely, it is a concern. Some of the manufacturers also, the manufacturers fully understand that. I'm not even going to give them some of them, right? Manufacturers fully understand that. So some of the ammunition that is produced, some of the different brands will put out stuff that's specifically designed for shorter barrels. Right, I'm not big into reloading, but you've got different gunpowder. Some gunpowder burns up a lot faster than other gunpowder, right? So when you have stuff with shorter barrels, they're going to use gunpowder that burns faster to be able to generate that velocity faster to get that bullet out of the barrel. And I don't know how true it is on handguns, but I believe on rifles, and it's probably the same on handguns, but about, every inch of barrel length equates to roughly 100 feet per second, right? And so a barrel that is, a 10-inch barrel roughly would have 500 feet less per second than a barrel that would be 15 inches, right? And so shorter barrels absolutely can suffer. And if you were tuned into the beginning of the show, I mentioned that the website Lucky Gunner is an option, Lucky Gunner Labs, to be able to go and look at the testing of different calibers, different guns, different bullets, and that kind of stuff. And they'll break it down. They'll show you, and you can see the same ammunition sometimes that have been shot through shorter barrels or versus longer barrels, and you can see a big difference in the testing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, that's where the rifles get their velocity from. It's not because it's, got a ton more powder, it's because it's in the barrel
Right.
longer.
Absolutely.
So, we got one question, what's our opinion on the best subsonic ammo for a 300 blackout SBR, so short-barreled rifle with a suppressor for home defense?
You know, I don't know. Do you own a 300 Blackout?
No, I don't. I've shot many of them. Jay Hawkins out in
Yeah,
Reno.
he's big into it.
He's big into the 300 blackout for hunting and for home defense actually. And if anyone's ever been to Reno, that's like the land of the suppressor. All my classes are loaded with suppressors when I go out there. I wanna say Jay, I've asked him that, like, I was like, "What do you use?" And I wanna say he's like Hornaday, Hollow Point. Uh, I'm gonna take a shot, like something like a 120 to 130 grain, something like that, subsonic.
And
Uh,
I could be wrong, but typically I think like a 110 at least is usually supersonic. Maybe they're I guess dumbing down some of the gunpowder in it. It's I mean I've got a 300 blackout. I got a couple of 300 blackouts, and I was super excited when I built the first gun. It had a 9-inch barrel. I put my suppressor on it. I'm like, this is gonna be awesome for everything. And then I remember testing it out, shooting vehicles with it, and I'm shooting subsonic ammunition, but the subsonic ammo, 220 grain stuff, was like barely making it through the sheet metal, and I'm literally finding the projectiles on the floorboard in the back seat after traveling through one door without hitting anything hard. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. It's maybe I've got the wrong ammo or something like that. And then a couple of years ago, I started hunting hogs with subsonic ammunition. And I really, I mean, I was killing the hogs, but I really wasn't satisfied, with any of it, really. And granted, hog hunting, I'm usually shooting 80 to 100 yards is most of the shots that I take when I'm shooting those hogs and stuff. But I really just wasn't impressed with it. And then, I let my kids shoot, I just let my son, shot his first deer, with it. And this was, I mentioned the 9-inch AR, but I think these were actually a 16-inch barrel, that shoot, at least with the deer. And when he shot that, it's kind of the same thing. I'm like, man, I'm really not impressed with it. And so, I have moved to a different round. So far, I like it, but I don't have enough experience through live animals yet to really be able to make a decision on whether or not it's like this is what I like for home defense or something. But it is I think they call it the Winchester Whitetail or something like that. It's 150 grain. Here's the thing, it's supersonic. I've kind of moved away from the subsonic ammunition and went to the supersonic ammo because of what I saw as being less effective, with the subsonics. And so, maybe somebody watching tonight, it's like, Barrett, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You should have tried, this subsonic ammunition. And if that's the case, guys, please post in the comments and let me know, because I would love to test it. I'd clearly much rather be shooting subsonic ammunition through it. But to date, the different ones that I tried, I got the same results. With all of them. It's just it's subsonic. So what does subsonic mean? Now the breaking the sound barrier is about 1,080 feet per second. I say about because it depends on humidity and pressure and that kind of stuff, right? So it's a kind of it's a dynamic number a little bit, but 1,080 feet per second. So it's got to be going at least, as slow as that. Well, 45 is out of a handgun is is naturally subsonic, right? 9 millimeter, however, is not. 115 grain, 127 grain is supersonic, and it becomes subsonic out of a handgun when you jump up to about 147 grain, right? So it all of it obviously depends on what you're shooting with it. Again, we're talking about home defense, we're talking about self-defense, concealed carry potentially, and so subsonic ammunition, most of the time is going to work fine in those instances because of the shorter ranges involved. Whereas opposed to me shooting at 100 yards at a hog, 220 grain projectile is losing velocity a little too fast, to still be effective for what I'm looking for the effectiveness out there at 100 yards.
okay, good. I'm glad you're around because, like, I don't have any suppressors because just over my years of I just am not in the mood to go through all the hassle and the paperwork and all that stuff for a can, Thanks. Another one we were talking about movies ruining things for us. Thank you to the Hollywood because everything is like whisper quiet, like suicide, like was it hired killer level,
Yeah, yeah.
hitman level,
Assassins.
silent. Yeah, assassin quiet, which is not the case, even with a and like the 300 blackout, you shooting subsonic is quiet, like hearing safe quiet, but I guarantee you, if I was standing in a room and somebody shot one, I'd be like, "Ooh, somebody's shooting a suppressed gun." Like,
Right, and there's, like it's, you can get some guns that are so quiet, you're hearing the hammer fall on the gun, you're hearing the bullet impact, a dirt berm 25 yards away, right? They do have quiet, but the large majority of the guns that we shoot with suppressors are still very loud. You're not going to just simply like sneak attack, right, with
yeah,
that suppressed system. I mean, my AR, I still have to wear hearing protection. So I spend all this money on a suppressor and I still wear hearing protection, right? Why? Well, it's a lot quieter, than it
yeah,
is unsuppressed. And so
yeah. I
there's lots of benefits to it. Have you seen the turnaround times right now?
um I see every once in a while I'll see somebody say, "Oh, it only took a week,"
So,
and
I
then
mean, people who like
that
submitted paperwork a year ago are still kind of, just now getting stuff back,
that's what
right?
I thought was the norm still.
That's
Like,
kind of the norm, but I don't, something happened in March. My understanding is the ATF like hired a bunch of employees, and they all of these new employees like put their focus on new applications or new stamps being filed, right? And so like all the new stuff is literally from the time that it's certified and submitted to the ATF, it's seeing anywhere from like a 24-hour turnaround to maybe a
wow,
2 or 3 weeks, on the high end. No, I mean, record times on these e-forms. And it's kind of crazy because if you look at the inventory for suppressors nationwide, there is none. It's kind of like the ammo crunch a few years ago. There was none. Doesn't matter which website you look at. And that's kind
yeah,
of what just happened with suppressors is that, in 2 months' time, it's like the internet got it out and whoom, there went all the inventory. And so right now is like a great time, but you're probably going to have to back order, what you want, depending on what it is.
yeah. So I never got into it, and then with the caliber thing, oh, I forgot when you said 1911, I did carry a Colt Delta Elite in 10 millimeter for a while too,
Oh,
and if
nice.
anybody's familiar with that gun,
I am.
that's a right-handed only gun,
Yeah.
and I'm a lefty.
Once again, wrong-handed sometimes.
But see, the Marine Corps taught me how to live in a right-handed world.
That's right.
Because like, when I got to boot camp and I was handed a rifle, it was sort of like, "Figure it out,"
No, and there is,
you know?
right? There's plenty of things to figure it out, but now you're not in boot camp. Now it's not issued. So
Yeah,
now you get a choice. So you might as well
right.
choose something that has less steps and is more efficient,
Oh, absolutely. But I
than,
love that gun, and I
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's look, my gun, my first gun I mentioned, is a Kimber custom TL, not my first gun. The one that was really, it was kind of my dedicated carry gun. It was a Kimber custom TLE, obviously chambered in 45 ACP. And let me tell you, this thing, I remember one day, like we were literally, had, I guess it was like a dirt mound or something out at like 250 yards away. And we're all standing up there. Not every shot was hitting, right? But we were,
what was every
kind of,
shot shooting?
yes, it was. You know why?
Ooh,
Because I
winning.
cleaned the gun that morning
Oh,
and
okay.
I had Chip McCormick magazines in it, right?
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah,
and that's how I used to kind of lie to myself. As long as I clean it, daily, and I have these Chip McCormick magazines and I have this ammunition, I'm pretty sure, not positive, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna go bang every time we press the trigger. Eventually I kind of evolved away from all of that, right? And if you, didn't catch the beginning of the show, that we were talking about that as well.
yeah. Oh, and
So
if anybody's, like, sitting there trying to, "Oh my god, I forgot the hockey game." The New York Rangers just advanced in the NHL playoffs. It just popped up
uh,
in the corner of my computer screen.
I'm gonna sleep better tonight.
Yeah. I don't
Just
have a
knowing that.
yeah, I know.
I don't know.
Woo.
Woo. All right, so we're coming towards the end of the show. Thank you all for participating with viewing and also dropping all the comments in there. I didn't get a chance to I think answer all of those questions, but y'all definitely participated. I see kind of going back and forth with one another as well. If you enjoyed this show tonight, then be sure to check out this sponsor. The Primary Arms online store, because they are what makes this possible. I mentioned we're in the PDN tour right now, pdntrainingtour.com. Figure out what location makes most sense for you. And there's lots of instructors, lots of different options available for that. And we talked a lot about ammunition tonight. The ammunition sponsor for the training tour this year is Freedom Munitions. I started buying Freedom back years and years ago. And I'm sure you did as well, right? They were super popular.
Yep.
Many of y'all were watching tonight, and they had some hiccups, and then they completely sold. And man, they've just been doing great stuff, with ammunition, and they've really taken care of us. I know that Deryck's have been putting Freedom through his guns, as well as all the loaner guns going out to the students and stuff. So have I, and certainly so have many other instructors. If you haven't had a chance to check out Freedom Munitions and their ammo, be sure to jump on the website as well.
Yep.
Well, cool.
Hey,
Yeah.
also G code. You said you just got your G code
Yeah.
for the
I
tour.
got a G code
The
holster
new.
right here. So
Yeah,
it's
nice. I got my first G code was for my PD10.
yes, I was gonna say, let me grab that one. I don't have it
Uh,
sitting here, but
yeah,
yeah, this is obviously, an outside waistband holster, but I've got the G code as well for the inside waistband system. And it's a great holster. I've kind of matched it up with something else as well. But no, I'm super happy with the G code. I forget. Do you know what the one's called? The one that we got for concealed carry?
is it the NCOG?
No,
No, you sure?
no,
I
I'm
thought it
not
was.
sure. I mean, that the Incog used to be one that they made. I don't think they're making that one anymore.
Let me see. My Google foo is on point tonight. Let's see. The Phenom.
Yes, that is it.
The Phenom.
Yes, they got a bunch of great holsters, but that was my favorite. Was that one? That was one I ordered, I think, last year. For that PD10. But yeah, definitely check
Yep.
out G Code. Also, I just I was getting my local gun store to order some of the G Code universal holsters. I don't know if y'all saw the video that Rob Pincus did several months back. I think he put it out on YouTube. I
Yep.
know Deryck. I know you saw it. I saw it. Basically, it was him taking all the guns out of his gun safe and sticking it into these two universal holsters. So there's a small medium and a medium large or something like that. They're ambidextrous. And so between, these two holsters, they fit something like 150 different handguns. I don't know how they did it. I'm guessing that, they took all the CAD files from all the guns and threw it in an averager or something. I don't know. That's how my brain works. And then spit out something that really does a great job fitting it. So they came into the local gun shop today, and I'm sitting there, grabbing guns from the cabinet, sticking them in there, and work really well for a universal holster. And the price point is $29.
Is
In
that
fact,
the
$26.
Paradigm or Paragram or Peregrine
Yes,
or something like that?
Paradigm or something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think, like $26 or something like that. I mean, it's literally like, if you need a kind of a generic holster to go to the range with to fit your different guns that you're testing, that kind of stuff. It's really a really cool system at $26 and fitting 150 different guns. And I own really several universal holsters, over the years, to be able to solve students' problems when their gear is failing and whatnot. And I'm pretty positive, to date, that's going to be my favorite one. And so they're ambidextrous. So like I said, left hand, right hand, but they're going to also be set up as a paddle, for outside waistband, or it comes with a clip to be able to use it inside waistband. So that's another cool system. Like you said, it's a Paradigm.
Yeah. I wish they'd sent that one this year because last year we got one last year for the smaller canics. This year the one that I got was the bigger one.
Yeah.
They're bigger out of outside specifically for the canics. I was
Yep, and I
actually
got the
hoping we were
Canic right here too. But if y'all haven't
gonna
been on the show a while, we kind of get canceled from one of the streaming platforms anytime we show a one of those banana shaped tools in the middle of a live program.
yeah. Hey, right before you say we're out, I'll hold the frame up. And actually, no, I won't do that. I got a frame sitting next to me, but I'm like, you know
Don't do
what?
that. They deleted the
That'll put
video.
or they'll put a strike and they'll
Right.
put a strike
Yeah,
against
definitely don't do that.
us.
Well, cool.
And
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Be sure to share the video with others. If you haven't subscribed to Personal Defense Network Training Tours YouTube page or Facebook page, certainly do so. You can find Deryck on social media at Echo 5 Training. You can find me either under Barret Kendrick or Bearco Training. And we hope to see you for next month's show in June. If you have a topic that you think that you really want us to discuss, definitely drop it into the comments, and it may be something that we're talking about on the next show. Until then, y'all certainly stay safe and get out on the range and do some training.